Welcome back. So in essence, in the last few slides, in the last few recordings, we have talked about the survey as a research approach. And we have said that one of the interesting dimensions of survey research is that by selecting just a handful of units, you might be able to draw inferences about large target populations. You might be able to collect a whole lot of information about large target populations. But the validity of that information depends heavily on how the sample was collected. Far too often, many surveys out there just do not pay enough attention to how they select the people they actually collect information for. Therefore, it is not surprising that far too often predictions that are based on those kind of polls and surveys end up not holding up. But there's decades of research that has shown that if you pay attention to the selection carefully, both at the level of design and at the level of implementation, and you analyze appropriately, surveys with very little resources can provide information about very large populations. And we've talked about key concepts in survey design. Some of those key concepts is, from our basic epidemiology, we understand what we mean by a target population, which is the population that is of interest, that we really want to know something about. For instance, we see electoral polls all the time. Polls talking about who is likely to win a presidential election or not. Basically, the target population for those kind of surveys is the universe of voters in the country. We've seen surveys like the DHS that wants to tell us about, that draws inferences that describe populations. For instance, describes uptakes of interventions for home management of diarrhea. And the universe, the target population, basically is all households that have kids under 5-year-old in them. But because it is not feasible to go ask every single person, just because the cost and the logistics would be a nightmare, key scientists have developed for us, and some scientists have been able to find out for us that we really don't need to talk to everybody to be able to draw valid inferences. We just need to know how we select people, and that selection needs to be probabilistic. We just need to know the actual probability of the selection of each person that ends up in the sample. And when that probability is equal across all the units in the sample, we have what we call a simple random sampling, which essentially is that you need to enumerate all the units in your target population and randomly select the number of units that you need, such that all the units have equal probability of selection. But we know that there are some, despite its simplicity, it's very easy to analyze. It is the most technically rigorous approach, but despite its simplicity and its rigor, that when it comes to implementation, some problems can arise. Far too often, there's a lot of non-response because most of these people end up being very widely distributed, very widely dispersed, and then there are too many people who are lost. We have said that, well, in a bid to solve some of the onerous enumeration problems that we need to surmount in being able to implement a simple random sampling, people have come up with a stratified random sampling in which sometimes we don't really need to do all the enumeration before We can sample. We just need to have a sense of how many units are in the population, how many units do we have to sample, and we know what is our sampling interval, and we begin to sample from a random point. And finally, we have said that sometimes we are interested in certain populations, but certain subpopulations of our target population who are not who are actually small subpopulations in our target population, but have oversized influence or but we have oversized interest in those subpopulations in our interpretation. If we leave our survey to the device of simple random sampling or stratified random sampling, we might not have enough people from such subpopulations to be able to draw precise inferences about them. Therefore, we might decide to stratify our populations before sampling them. So these are the key. This this is a bird's eye view of the technical approaches to drawing our sample, but there are pitfalls that we have to pay attention to. At the end of the day, irrespective of any of the technical approaches we're taking, we have to look at the issues we need to confront when it comes to implementation, because far too often non-response is what sounds the death knell on surveys. At the end of the day, irrespective of the approach you're taking, if far too many people cannot be reached from your sample, at the end of the day, you might end up having a useless survey. Or even if you reach far too many people, but people are consistently leaving, far too many of them have left out key questions on the survey. At the end of the day, your survey might be uninterpretable. Thank you.